After that, we spent some time putting together the armor. And man, do I mean some time. It took nearly a week to get it right. All of the details had to be finite in order for everything to work properly, to ensure that it was both functional and easy to get in and out of, as well as having to be portable on top of it. But eventually we managed it. After the suit was constructed, he was right. I gave Ed every bit of credit he deserved. This suit was awesome. I mean, wearing it made me feel untouchable. My original suit was so bulky in comparison. I had a hard time moving around effectively. I was more worried about getting shot and things like that. But this thing was so flexible it was crazy. Aside from the weight of the armor itself, it didn't affect my movement at all. And we put in some extra details to ensure that it looked the absolute maximum level of awesome. For instance, on the helmet, I included what amounted to sort of a face. Not a normal human person face. Something super badass, wicked. Like straight off the cover of a heavy metal album. The type of thing that if you saw in a dark alley, you might just shit yourself for a moment. I spent some time after we made the armor getting used to moving around in it, and utilizing the functions, such as opening the mouthpiece. That would allow me to release more liquid steel, which, as I said, I did check out in the mirror, and it looked awesome. I also did a fair amount of work beating the attachments into my memory so that I could make them on reflex almost, and connect specific types of gear that I might create on the fly to my armor. Shields for protection, specialized weaponry and objects that I might need in varying situations. Honestly, the armor looks so badass that I was really tempted to take it out for a test drive. Go fight some minor league crime in it. Get my face out there a little bit more. But I actually decided against it. After all, I do have an army to fight. A super-powered army at that. Every time I show up, it gives them information on me. Even if the information that they might get off of the news is limited, they could still utilize it. Take a measure of my abilities. For example, they might learn about how slowly I create this liquid metal. The time it takes is definitely a weakness. If they really got to thinking about it and knew how fast I could make it, they might start trying to pile on damage, so to speak. Attack me all outright. Try to wear down on the amount that I have access to, until I have none left, which would definitely be bad. And that's if they figure out that the amount can actually decrease, which is something I definitely want to avoid. So for the time being, I decided not to go out, at least not until I either have an ample supply of liquid steel, so that they can't really tell what I have at my disposal, or it becomes absolutely necessary. For example, another attack with people with super abilities. Honestly though, when it comes to the amount of liquid steel I had, I was actually doing fairly well. The decreased amount that went into the armor that I made actually left me with a decent amount left over from what I initially had before I made it. And then I had an extra week's worth on top of it. So I was beginning to gather quite a collection of it. And being able to store it away in my gut actually made it so much more convenient. To be honest, I was actually approaching enough to make an entirely different suit if I wanted to. But primarily, that wasn't what I was thinking about using it for right now. Primarily, I was more interested in the fact that I now had enough that I didn't have to change, shifting between attack and defense anymore. Before, whenever I wanted to do something with the liquid steel, to attack with it, I always had to pull it from my armor. But now, I had a full set of armor and a nice collection of liquid steel aside from it, meaning I could attack with it as much as I wanted, in as many ways as I wanted, without having to sacrifice any of my defense for it, or take the time drawing it back to me or sending it out. I could just have a stable amount outside that I constantly used to attack, manipulate the environment and the situation. I had already thought of a bunch of different ways to do it. For example, I had started working on figuring out exactly how much liquid steel I needed to move an object that wasn't made of liquid steel. I found out that it all depends on the amount that I use. The more liquid steel I attach to an object, the less focus and energy that I have to put into moving that object. If I only have a small amount attached to it, then it's actually fairly strenuous to try to move anything. But the more I add to it, the easier it becomes. I tested this out using the training weights that I had gathered up, and was using very frequently. Based on my little study, I found that it took a 2-to-1 ratio to move an object the same way I would move liquid steel, with about the same level of effort. In other words, in order to move an object without an increased amount of effort, the amount of liquid steel I had to attach to it had to be double its general size or weight. So in order to move 50 pounds, I had to attach enough liquid steel that the general size of the liquid steel added up to about the same size as the 50 pounds in weight, and then add double that amount, so the amount of liquid steel would be double the size of the weight itself. With that ratio, I could move an object with the same level of ease that I could move the liquid steel. But at a 1-to-1 ratio, it was exceptionally difficult, meaning I had to focus and put more energy into it. That's something else that I actually started training, because according to Nylea, it was actually an effective means of training. Just like my muscles, my kinetic abilities, my ability to manipulate the steel, the force I can output, the speed I can make it travel at, depends on the strength of my telekinetic energy. And just like the muscles in your body, the level that I'm able to output can actually go up with training and time, by flexing my muscles, so to speak, building them up so that I become even stronger while using the liquid steel. But once again, it's a time-consuming and draining process, just like regular exercise. You have to put effort into it, and lots of it. So as a means of training, I began doubling up. Not only would I be lifting my regular weights while bench pressing, squatting, doing lunges and things of that nature, but I would also have the liquid steel at my disposal attached to large amounts of weights, and focus on lifting those along with the weight that I was physically lifting with my body. But eventually, I ended up having to start going back to work, which cut into my training time, but the money I got from going on talk shows and from the mayor wasn't going to last forever. I couldn't simply keep pulling from it. I had to keep working my job, if I wanted to keep living, that is. My boss was happy enough to see me come back, especially since it meant that he could now show me off to the new customers that were coming in. And they were quite excited to see the hero of New Star City. However, my short-lived stardom was starting to grow a little old at this point, and I had been replaced by a new heroic figure in the news, the Heavy Metal Knight, which is both an ego boost and a little depressing. The more famous the Heavy Metal Knight got, the less I got the star treatment. But I suppose I'm fine with that arrangement. I had also been getting regular visits from Vicky and my parents. I of course had to put onto my parents a miraculous recovery, regaining full control of my arms, despite the doctor's thoughts that it wouldn't come back, which my mother was overjoyed about, and my father of course.